David Lukey with GrassFlap. Today we're going to be showing you how to put a GrassFlap onto a John Deere lawnmower with a 7-iron deck. First thing we're going to do is install the no-drill mount. We'll do this by placing the no-drill mount on the back side of the rib that's on the deck, and then using the existing holes that are there, we'll go ahead and put the carriage bolts. There's a 5/16 by 1 inch carriage bolts. Place those bolts into the center set of holes on the no-drill mount, and then roughly center those bolts in that slot. Go ahead and secure this down. Then we're going to go ahead and put the GrassFlap itself onto the no-drill mount. So we'll position it, then using the 3/8 by 1 carriage bolts that are provided in the kit, we'll go ahead and mount this to the no-drill mount. We'll go ahead and make sure that the flap itself is against the discharge opening, and we're going to run these nuts down until they're almost tight, but not quite, because we still need to make sure when we do the final tighten that everything is where it belongs. Okay, now it's there and everything's tight. And we're going to move on to going ahead and positioning the spring mount. So we'll use the 5/16 by 1 carriage bolt that we removed earlier and go ahead and secure the spring mount. We'll put this in roughly a horizontal position. Mainly what you want to do is make sure that it's in line so when the cable comes off it doesn't get in the mower itself. Next step then, we're going to go ahead and put the cable onto the pedal. So the first step is we'll remove the spring. Then we're going to go ahead and remove the rubber boot from the cable itself, spin nut number 1 off. And then we're going to take nut number 2 and run it all the way back onto the fitting, and then move it up maybe a turn or so. Then we'll slip the cable wire into the slot, the fitting into the hole that's there, and then we'll go ahead and start nut number 1 back onto the threaded fitting. Once we get it started on there, then we're going to go ahead and pull the rubber boot back while we can still reach it easily, and pull that rubber boot back into place. Then go ahead and spin nut number 1 back until it's snug against the nut number 2. Now we're going to go ahead and reconnect the spring. This will hold the pedal in the down position. Now we're going to go ahead and pull the cable out where we can see the ball and slip the slotted clevis onto the cable itself. Then by turning the clevis and pushing the whole thing, the cable and all, back farther in, we're able to turn the clevis and connect it to the pedal. So we want the slotted side on the same side as the head of the pin. Now we're going to go ahead and put the cotter pin in. I found it's easier to use a pair of needle nose pliers to slip that pin in. You can hold it and then split the cotter pin itself, bend both legs back. This will ensure that it stays up out of the way when the pedal is operated. Now we're going to go ahead and show you the routing that we want to end up with on the cable. So we're going to slip it through the hole on the foot pan, run it around and secure it up here. And then we're going to run on over to the flap itself. So now I've shown you where it's going to run and how it is routed. Then let's go back and actually make that installation. So we're going to take the cable and we're going to slip it into one of the square holes here, just past the middle of the foot pan on the left-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and route this cable around so it's roughly pointed over to the GrassFlap itself. Now we've got the cable put in place, we're going to go ahead and install the nuts and the backup washers. So there's 2 large black washers that were included in the kit. We're going to go ahead and use the carriage bolts that were there, put the large washer on, and then start the nut onto that bolt. We've got the one on the back, and then we've got to also do the bolt up here in the front. Same process, large black washer followed by the nut onto the bottom. So you can see we use the two holes next to the hole where we put the cable through for bolting everything down. We'll go ahead and tighten everything up. Okay, now we want to go over to the flap end. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and connect the spring to the spring bolt. I found a pair of channel locks is a pretty easy way to do this. We get that in position. Make sure everything still operates smoothly. Then the next step is we're going to go ahead and put the cable on. And so once again, we're going to pull the rubber boot off, spin nut number 1 off the fitting. And this time we're going to do a little different. We want to spin nut number 2 halfway up on the threaded fitting. Now this is exactly opposite of what we did on the pedal. So once we have it in this position, slide the cable into place, put nut number 1 back on, and we want to spin it on just far enough that the rubber boot can be returned to the end of the fitting. We'll go ahead and push the rubber boot back on. Now we're going to go ahead and connect the fixed clevis end of the cable to the flap itself. We're going to start with this 1/4-inch bushing that was in the kit, followed by the pin, and you want to make sure when you put the pin in that the head of the pin is on the same side as the spring. This ensures that the spring, when it passes the pin itself, won't cause any problems. If you do it the other way, you run the risk of the cotter pin getting bent back out of place and the pin falling out. So we'll split the cotter pin, fold both ends down, and we're good to go there. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and snug up with nuts, hold the fitting in place. Now we're going to go ahead and zip tie the cable up into above the belts. So you can either go under this rubber stop that's here for the foot pan or foot plate itself. There's also a square hole there that you could do the same thing with. You're going to go ahead and pull this zip tie, not super tight, but so it's snugged up pretty good. This will keep the cable up off the pulleys and run over and across. Make sure you raise the deck up and down just to make sure that there's not anything dragging on the cable itself. Okay, now that we've got that done, we're going to go ahead and secure the jam nuts on the cable on this end. And then the final step is we want to bend the rear of the plate itself to match the curve on the back of the discharge opening. So just using a simple crescent wrench, bend it a little at a time until you get to an angle that's going to match like this onto the back end. Okay, so there we go. We've completed the installation. So again, we'll just check everything out. Little foot operation, push and release, opens and closes it. Then we can feather the discharge just by simply holding our foot on the pedal.